Welcome to Networking RX, a podcast devoted to helping business professionals like you enhance your networking skills in order to become more proficient giving and receiving quality business referrals and improving the overall quality of your life and the lives of those around you. The Networking RX podcast is a production of AmSpirit Business Connections, an organization whose mission is to empower business success through networking.
Welcome back for another episode. This is Frank Agin, founder and president of AmSpirit Business Connections, and you are listening to the Networking RX podcast. I took a call or had a call scheduled with somebody a couple weeks back, and they were presenting something to me, pitching me on something, and the term they used to try and promote the opportunity, and I won't get into what the opportunity is, it doesn't really matter, but they were saying this has the possibility to create generational wealth. And he kind of went on to talk about that, didn't really elaborate, but I knew what he meant by generational wealth. What generational wealth is, it's the notion of passing on assets from one generation to the next and then to the next. And that's something, it sounds alluring. When I heard that, it was like, it just kind of caught my attention. I think it was kind of a natural human reaction to, hey, there's something there. There's gold there in them there hills. It kind of has the feel of royalty. That's, you look at the Queen of England. Her wealth, everything that she has, her title, everything she's passing on is generational. It goes back generation to generation to generation. And I get that there are some schisms here and there and some murder and mayhem to kind of keep it all moving forward. But the wealth associated with the British crown has been passed forward for generations. And then you also have, industry barons who make a fortune. Rockefeller, Edison, and that's certainly generational wealth. Ford is another one that comes to mind. So, that's, when the person was talking generational wealth, they were talking about money so you don't have to work anymore, your kids don't have to work anymore, your kids' kids don't have to work anymore. And as neat as that sounded, I know rationally, and again, I think my initial human reaction was, ooh, wow, that's something I really need to listen to. But my rational reaction is that the notion of generational wealth is problematic. The first problem with it is that future generations grow exponentially. There's children, there's grandchildren, there's great-grandchildren, and so on and so forth. If a couple has, who has created generational wealth has two children, and each of their children has two children, and then each of their children's children has two children, you quickly go 2, 4, 8 in a hurry. And that's just with two. And if the family size is larger, then it expands even more. And that's, even when you see with the British crown, you don't have to go back too terribly far to know that there was King George VI, who was married to Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother. And then they had two children. They had Queen Elizabeth II and Princess Margaret. Well, Queen Elizabeth II then had Charles, also had a daughter named Anne, Prince Andrew, and Prince Edward. So there's 4 kids from Queen Elizabeth II. I couldn't even find, I guess I could look into it, but Prince Margaret, who's the Countess of Snowdon, I don't know how many children she had, who she married. The tree I'm looking at, it doesn't indicate. It just kind of follows the primary lineage, and Charles married Diana, and they had 2 children. They had Prince William and Prince Harry. Prince William has had, who is next in line after Charles, has 3 children. So it starts to expand out, and with the royal family, it really kind of looks down. I think everybody kind of gets a share, but at some point, when you're kind of a cousin and a cousin of a cousin, and so on and so forth, you're less part of royalty. There's royal blood, but you're less part of royalty, and that's what happens with generational wealth. As the family grows, the lineage outpaces the growth of the assets. I mean, the assets can only grow so fast. But the family is at some point just 2 becomes 4, becomes 8, becomes 16, becomes 32. I mean, it just goes and goes and goes, and the assets can't keep pace. And that's one of the problems with generational wealth. The other problem with generational wealth, even if you have a family, even if Queen Elizabeth II, and they only had Charles, and they only had Prince William, and he and Catherine only had one child, Prince George of Cambridge. Even if there's only one in the lineage, eventually people start to not appreciate the wealth. I mean, the first generation that earns the wealth, and you see this a lot, certainly in the United States, the first generation that earns the wealth, they see it, they feel it, they've got the bloody knuckles of being out there and the hard work, and bloody knuckles might be literally or figuratively, but they see the hard work, the long hours of building whatever has been built. The retail giant or the manufacturing company or the tech company or whatever it is. It's, any enterprise out there takes hard work. Every one of them does. And if you think otherwise, you're just wrong. It takes hard work. And so then the next generation comes along, and they don't necessarily have the bloody knuckles. They don't necessarily feel the hard work, but they saw the hard work. They saw that mom or dad was away from home, constantly, and what the hours and the commitment that went into building the wealth. And that's the second generation. Third generation doesn't see any of that. They just come in and the wealth is there, and so they start to don't appreciate it. They're not adding to the wealth; they're just kind of squandering it, and it's gone. And that's the problem with generational wealth. And when I heard this person say this to me, and I really started thinking through it, it made me think of a book that I read years ago by Peter Buffett. Peter Buffett is one of the children of Warren Buffett, one of the richest men in the world. And Peter Buffett wrote a book. It's called Life is What You Make It. Find Your Own Path to Fulfillment. It came out in 2010. It's a good book, but the premise, part of the premise in the book is that what Warren Buffett did with his children, Warren's wife is Susan, what they decided to do is that when they passed, the bulk of their estate, the bulk of their wealth, billions of dollars, that's a B, 9 zeros with an S on, multiple billions of dollars, was going to go to charities. I think they have earmarked it to go to the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. I could be wrong on that, but I think a chunk of it's going there. In other places, it's going to charity. But what Warren and his wife Susan did is they gave each of their kids $90,000. Basically saying, you need to make it on your own. Don't count on generational wealth. And really what I took away from that book and the lesson to this particular episode of the podcast is what Warren has really passed on to the kids is what I'll call generational capabilities. And generational capabilities are life lessons and attitudes and habits that are enduring, right? I mean, I can teach you the Pythagorean theorem, basically a 90-degree. Well, we'll skip the Pythagorean theorem for a moment. I can teach you the alphabet. I can teach you how to read. I can teach my kids how to read, and that can be passed on then to their kids, and so on and so forth. Those are generational capabilities, and the ability to pass those on, it's certainly scalable, because I can teach my kids to read, and they can teach their kids to read, and I can mentor other people and teach them to read, and so on and so forth, and continue to pass on that lesson, and those capabilities are passed on. Likewise, the notion of having a positive attitude or a resilient mindset, talents and skills, a tireless work ethic, disciplined insight, knowledge, a love of learning, kindness, compassion, and empathy. Those are all things that can be passed on from generation to generation. Likewise, learning how to have relationships and having solid relationships is something that can pass on. So while it sounds alluring to have generational wealth, in my mind, there are a lot of pitfalls to it. And certainly I want to help my kids, and it'll probably be more than $90,000, God willing. But I think the biggest thing that I can hand on to my kids, or to people that I know, people out there listening, don't have kids, might not plan to have kids, and that's fine. But what you can pass on to other people, we're all mentoring somebody, are these generational capabilities. Bringing people up to speed with just the notion of caring for one another, just with the notion of networking, how to build relationships. And that's, my biggest promise, my biggest sense of optimism with my kids is seeing how they operate in the world, and how they're building networks, how they're using people around them to accomplish things, to achieve. My youngest son bought a house. I'm watching him connect with friends and getting friends to come over and help, not just with manual labor, but friends who have friends who know people who have dumpster companies and framing companies and plumbers, and it's inspiring. I don't know that I was at that point when I was his age, but I like to think, picks that up for me. I see that same trait in my daughter. I see those same traits in my son. The ability to use relationships and create relationships, and then use those relationships to accomplish the things that need to be accomplished. And that's something that they will carry forth. Their kids will learn that in equal proportion to what I've taught, to what I have done. And their friends who come to me and, hey, Mr. Agin, or Frank, I prefer Frank, can you, help me get a job? Can you look at my resume? Being able to sit with them and teach them the things that I know, my generational capabilities. Again, the resiliency, the mindset, the skills and talents. And I realize things change. I mean, my parents didn't have LinkedIn, didn't pass that on to me, but I've learned that. But it's all, part of, they taught me how to read, and that taught me how to do certain things. So, yeah, get out there, work hard, make your money, get yourself ready for retirement, enjoy your life. But really the biggest thing that you can pass on to other people are not those assets, not generational wealth. Those are nice, but where you will benefit the world the most are through the generational capabilities that you pass on to other people. And again, it's habits, it's attitudes, it's mindset. It can be a lot of things, but those are the things that everybody will always appreciate, and it's something that doesn't tend to get diluted in time. The lineage will, those generational capabilities will keep pace as the lineage expands. Just something to think about as you work to achieve, and accumulate things in your life.
Thanks for joining us on the Networking RX podcast. Please put what you've learned into action today and let us know if you have questions, comments, or ideas for future topics. You can email them to us at podcast@amspirit.com. That's AmSpirit.com. Finally, so you never miss an episode, be sure to subscribe to the Networking RX podcast through iTunes, Overcast, or however you receive your podcasts. Now get out and network with someone.
The Networking RX podcast is the copyright production of AmSpirit Business Connection. All rights reserved.